Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining our info webinar series again. How are you today? I hope you can hear me clearly. We will start in about 5 minutes as we allow the rest to slowly flow in. Okay. Now, in the meantime, I'm going to do a short sharing about SHRI for the benefit of those who are not our members and first time joining our webinar today. SHRI, we are Singapore's leading professional HR body dedicated to powering human capital in tandem with our nation building efforts. And we are as old as Singapore. 55 this year, and we'll be celebrating it in November. So this is our vision and mission. We'd like to advocate HR best practices, connect community of HR professionals, and of course, enhance the HR profession. This is about SHRI. Under the SHRI group, we have SHRI, and we look at enhancing HR profession through our professional membership and our signature events. We have SHRI Academy and SHRI Corporation. So at SHRI Academy, we look to raise and enable HR professionalism via our School of Human Capital Management and our WSQ and HRP accredited short courses. And SHRI Corp, we look to provide HR resources, expertise, and value-added services to individuals and organizations via our public learning workshops, our corporate HR training, and of course, our consultancy work. And of course, we would like to be the HR ecosystem for HR professionals in Singapore. So now, all these are our national and regional partners that we work very closely with. And these are the different type of membership categories that we have with us. And these are our key events for the year. We used to host them face-to-face prior to COVID. A lot of our events have moved on to fully online webinars. Of course, situation is getting a lot better in Singapore. We hope to see and be able to run these events face-to-face next year and see many of you. I see quite a good number of us with us already. A very good afternoon again, everyone. Thank you for taking time to join our webinar today. I am Lynette, Senior Manager, Events and Marketing at SHRI. Great. Okay, so I'm going to share a little bit about today's webinar. So the theme that we have for today's webinar is Holistic Compensation, tackling today's payroll and rewards challenges. So payroll and rewards are two basic yet very important functions in HR and in organization, right? I'm sure all of you would agree with me. We have many HR professionals with us today. So in many of the webinars that we've done this year, we have had participants ask and a lot of questions revolving around these two topics, and especially about the changes in these functions in today's new normal, now that most of us are actually working from home more than half of our time, right? So today, we are very honored to have invited our partners from Unit 4 and Rewardz to share their expertise on these familiar areas. So before we kick off today's webinar, I'm just going to share some quick ground rules for the ease of your participation. So I know many of you would already very familiar with webinar functions, right? So for better control, we are all muted. And like all of you are doing, we are making your chats in the chat boxes. Thank you very much. Just want to highlight that if you have any questions, do drop them in the Q&A icon instead so that we don't miss any of your questions. And we'll definitely address them in the Q&A segment later on with our speakers, okay? And the webinar video and slides will be shared with you next week after the webinar. Not to worry about that too. Okay, so we've also received one question from a participant. So this question I know will be addressed in one of our speakers deck later on. So do let us know if you have any other questions in the Q&A. We'll be happy to address and share with you later on in the Q&A segment. So now, without further ado, okay, I am going to hand over the session over to our first speaker of the day, Joyce from Unit 4. Ms. Joyce Choi is actually a solution consultant with Unit 4 Asia Pacific and helps to simplify and to automate HR processes through the use of their ProSoft technology. So Joyce will share practical tips with you on tackling today's payroll challenges. Joyce, please.
Thank you, Lynette. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. and thank you for taking time today to participate in this webinar. My name is Joyce, and I'm a solutions consultant with Unit4. So previously, when I started off, I was in the HR operations, very hands-on in terms of dealing with payroll issues myself. And gradually, I moved over to do the HR consultation. And so within a huge MNC, I was helping subsidiaries with two different areas on the HR consultation. One is about the HRMS implementation. We were using the ProSolve system, and then as well as doing the payroll outsourcing for the subsidiaries. So I'm very happy that I have this opportunity to share with my fellow HR fraternities that the experience that I have gathered over these few years, and also how I can use them to improve on payroll functions. And now that I'm in the technical position, and how I can apply whatever I have in the HR into the technical, and to further help the other of my HR fellows to improve on your HR payroll experience as well. Okay, so I start off with a very typical payroll story, which all of us doing payroll are very familiar with. So imagine you are the person doing the payroll, and so these are the things that you will encounter every month in huge number of transactions, and also it's like they just come at you all the time, right? Okay. And then next, you have something to do with the deadlines. You have deadlines coming from all kinds of directions at you. And also you have a lot of requests regarding salary calculation and so on from different parties, not just within your team, but also outside your team. So this is really a very exciting job for the payroll person indeed. And I guess in a way we can agree with something, the common point is that payroll is a function that is constantly racing against time, and payroll needs to be highly accurate. I think we do agree to that, right? And yet, with these kind of constraints, right, we are further constrained by these kind of things that require high accuracy. So things like statutory requirements of the country, and also bank cutoff dates, that really hits your deadlines a lot, and also your company's HR policies. So the things that will make accuracy and timeliness very important for payroll. Okay. So I kind of classify the challenges hitting the payroll into 4 broad categories, which I list in this slide. So I'll go through one by one in detail. Okay, so the first payroll challenge that we have, slow information. So we have to ask a lot of questions. Why is information slow, and what does slow means? So I feel that slow is actually relative to your deadline. So we have to look at the reason why it is being slow. Okay, so I would like you to take a step back and sometimes question certain things in your payroll operations, like why is the deadline being set? Okay, and it might be set maybe like several years ago, and you want to evaluate it time and again in a periodic manner, whether the deadlines are still relevant. And also, can we also help some of our internal stakeholders with the information data collection, help them a bit, give them a bit of instructions, and also to let them know what are our cut-off dates, what are our internal expectations as well. So we can kind of mitigate a bit on the slow information. Next is about incomplete information. So I would say the culprits are usually things like human and the system. So if it's the human factor, so we want to ask ourselves, is there any possibility that it's always a particular group of people who are not able to give you the information in a completed manner? And why is that so? And also, like, how can payroll help them to provide the information that is completed for you? Is there something wrong with the data collection that we have? And also, we want to ask the questions about the system settings that you have in your HRMS. Sometimes, right, we can get a bit of help with some automatic reminders, for example, to point out to us when we do the data entry, which areas did we not complete, and how do we ensure that they are always completed. So we may want to look at some of the settings in our system to make our job easier. Okay, the next one, right, is about different mediums of information. So I would like to cite a very typical example, which is the gathering of attendance time records, basically. So time records, right? You have the situation where the time records could be in hard copies and also soft copies, and different sources of data, even in soft copies. And so we need to review the processes on how the data is being collected. Okay, so ideally speaking, you will want just one single medium to gather and collate all your data in one source and give it to the payroll system to crunch, right? But however, you always have this difficulty, and you have to ask the question, why is that so? And you want to ask the question from the very beginning, from the employee's perspective. So how do they actually provide the data to HR in the beginning and get it to be approved step by step? So do we have any constraint along the way? Is there any challenges? Like, for example, infrastructure of the data collection method, can that be changed at all? And do expect that along the way you will face some constraints and also resistance when you try to change certain things like that. All right. So I do believe that different mediums of information is definitely both a technical and a human issue. Okay. So next is the combination of both slow and incomplete information, and also is more difficult than the earlier two is because last minute instructions from management is very hard for you to control. And most of the time management, especially the top management, they are not aware of the operational constraints of payroll. And even if they know, they don't care because they feel that the direction they give for certain payment or a certain salary, right, is extremely important and it's mission critical. So we don't usually argue with the management about why should a salary be paid in a particular month and by which date. All right. So these kind of things, right? How do we tackle it? I would say it's best to ensure that your payroll system is flexible enough for you to take care of these things. And also you must bear in mind you want to take on a slightly more proactive approach and be ready to negotiate and to kind of collaborate and communicate well in order to tackle this particular payroll challenge. Okay, so, right. Okay, now I would like to share with you an unsuccessful payroll story. Okay, so what turned a payroll operations into an invincible monster? So let me share with you my own personal experience and when I was doing payroll myself. Okay, so how did this particular payroll operation turn to something that's really like out of control? Okay, so first of all, this company has more than 500 employees. So in terms of quantity, in terms of the number of transactions involved for payroll to do adjustment, that's really a lot every month. All right. And second, I have to have update employee information in two separate systems, not one. So we do know when you need to do double entry, that's double the effort, and also potentially two different sets of information if the data entry is not good. Okay. And there was also a very particularly interesting scenario back then was that the supervisors on the ground perceived that as long as they receive a resignation letter from their employees and they don't submit it to HR, it means that resignation is not recognized and not accepted. So I believe for us, we are the HR professionals. We do know that that's not the way resignation date is being treated, right? Yeah. So that gave HR and payroll quite a lot of trouble in that sense that we really, really have to beg the supervisors, please give us those resignation letters. We need to process them. We need to give the final salary to the employee. So that was really like, not a very funny situation actually. Yeah. So we had to deal with such things. And also overtime data was really mostly in hard copies, could be handwritten forms as well. And so I have to collate such a lot of information which were really like not very good, very poor quality data in fact. And to couple with that, not just the input, the poor quality of data input, I have my system limitations as well. I was not familiar with the HRMS I was working on, and even then the statutory settings were faulty, and that resulted in many mistakes in the calculation sometimes. And if you have time constraint, large volume of data, that's not very helpful. And imagine the time spent just to correct those mistakes. That was really very scary. Yeah. And I think the straw that broke the camel's back was that there was one incident when I had to do the computation of salary adjustments and bonus for one particular month, and the instructions that came to me was in error. All right, so I had to change and update and do salary adjustments for the employees in the second month, and also to regenerate the bonus letters for the employees in the second month in the other HRMS. So there was like 2 rounds of adjustments over 2 systems. That's like double the work. That was really very scary. Okay. So after all these years, when I have gathered more industrial knowledge and experience, I look back at what was done the last time, and I ask myself, could I have done anything better compared to what I was in the past? So I tell myself, the things that I could have done better. First, I could have really reviewed the work processes earlier to have a better understanding. Look at the points of improvement where I could have done things better. Okay, and having said that as well, as I mentioned, I was not very familiar with the new HR system back then, and I think I could have asked for more help to review some of these settings, get some technical assistance to understand how the system worked and why is it that if a small little checkbox was not ticked, what are the impact on the rest of the calculations? Things like that would prevent me from miscalculating things and also to prevent me from redoing work that is very that will cause a lot of time consuming issues. Okay, I could have gotten more help from the team, and also I could have proactively created some rules to standardize data collection. Okay, so these are my own personal reflections. So I'm not sure about yourself. Do you face such an issue, and would you want to do things better as well? Okay, so next I cite to you another example, another story, which is a successful payroll story, I would say. So that was during the days when I'm doing payroll outsourcing. And so I have to work with one of the subsidiary companies to handle the vaccination of a high-level professional. He's a foreigner. And so we need to do a lot of things like the tax clearance, withholding of salary before the tax clearance, the final bonus, which is purely on the management discretion and things like that. And even from the very beginning, the vaccination date was not firm. Okay, when we have to deal with that, right, we will have to ask a lot of questions. So what is the deadline that we need to meet? So we consulted this in a very quick manner. We have to give the heads up to the payroll operations to tell them this is going to happen and within which deadline, which month may be impacted. And the payroll operations quickly gave us the information. This is the reasonable deadline. This is what the system can help you to do. And then also we were able to advise the management in this way, and then they can speed up the decision making in that sense. Okay, so very happily, even though there were like at least 6 people involved in this vaccination case, but because of the very good and clear communication that we have, and also the very, very confidence that our payroll operations have on the system, which incidentally was the Unit4 ProSoft system, we were able to use the system's flexibility to really handle the standalone calculation in a very, very quick and timely manner and to achieve what we want to do. So we managed to do the tax filing on time without breaking the law. We managed to clear the employee for his final salary, and we also managed to really, get him to understand, what is his final take-home pay before he leaves the country. So these are very important for all our stakeholders, not just the management, but also for the employee, the resigning employee himself. So that really helped to, maintain a very, very good communication for the employee. Okay. So when we look at our payroll challenges, right, I would want to introduce to you 3 steps how you want to tackle these challenges. So first of all is to categorize the challenges when you meet them, okay? So we have a lot of challenge along the way. So we cannot tackle everything at one shot. We need to prioritize our resources. So in this diagram, you can see I have classified the challenges as whether they are controllable within payroll's control or uncontrollable, and whether your solution can be a short-term or a long-term solution, okay? So I would say that incomplete and slow information are the low-hanging fruits that you can try to achieve. So because these are very much controlled within the payroll and HR environment. Whereas for things like different mediums of information, you may need more stakeholders involved. Could be internal stakeholders like the other departments, and also external stakeholders like your HRMS vendor. Okay, so they are not so easy to tackle, and you need to plan your resources beforehand. Yeah. Okay, so the next step which I would recommend you to take when you have a payroll challenge is to confront the challenge itself. Don't run away, otherwise you will not learn anything. Okay, so imagine you have a very difficult scenario to take care of, like for example, the per diem allowance calculation, which impacts both CPF and also for IRAS tax filing in a certain sense. Okay, so what would you do? So sometimes it's easy to just go the manual way, calculate everything on Excel and then dump them onto a payroll system and hopefully, okay, everything is done. Okay, but how about, why don't you try to consider exploring new solutions and to see whether you can automate certain calculations, review the workflow of how per diem allowance can be flowed from HR to accounting, and also how accounting can be accountable for certain things and how HR can be accountable for other statutory matters. And so if you have a better process, you don't need to face this issue that could have been like chronic, and it means that you have to keep facing this issue month after month after month. Okay, and so the experience for you as a payroll will improve if you try to confront the challenge instead of running away from it. Okay. So the third step, which I will recommend you to take, right, is to translate these payroll challenges into your HRMS requirements. So when you need to look at a HRMS to see how a HRMS can help you, right, I will recommend you to look at the qualities as listed in this slide. Okay, so the first one is accuracy. This is already a given. You don't want to, worry about statutory matters. This is like the first and most fundamental thing. You want to make sure that these calculations are correct, formulas are correctly set up, allowance deductions are properly set up, data validation is in place to help you do checking. So there's like as minimal manual intervention as possible. Then next, right, you'll want your HRMS to be flexible and adaptable at all times. So how do you ensure that, if you have a very urgent case of having to recalculate things, is it easy to recalculate in your system? So you have the case, if it's your turn next time, right, to calculate that kind of high level professional resigning. So is your system ready for you to take on such a challenge, to recalculate the salary on a just one specific level, and yet it doesn't cause a complete standstill? Okay. And of course, your system must be highly configurable in that sense. And third is usability. And so sometimes we are, in fact, all of us are humans. We are not machines. We do fall sick at times. And so you cannot expect the payroll person to be in the office every day and also, handle payroll all the time. So let's say if you are on leave or anything, and suddenly someone needs a report from your team. So can all your colleagues, your other HR colleagues, be able to draw reports on their own without your help? Okay, and then also they would just continue to perform their functions, they get their reports, and without having to think of payroll being a black box, the HRMS is a black box that only the payroll person can use. Okay, we don't want that. Okay, and also is the system user-friendly enough for you to do interfacing and automation to help you to make your job easier? And can the skills be transferred easily from one user to another? So do consider these factors when you think about how the HRMS can help you to tackle your payroll challenge. Okay, so after this session, right, I think I'd like to share with you the homework that you can have for yourself. Okay, so just like the earlier diagrams, I have classified the payroll challenge into like short-term and long-term solutions that you can take on. Okay, so in the short term, this is what I recommend you to do. First of all, you review your communication process and also your payroll submission deadlines. These are very easy things to do. And then second, you want to review some very basic HRMS settings and workflow to make sure that at least you achieve the minimum level of efficiency and accuracy. And in the long term, you may want to consider things like a bigger project, maybe a slightly bigger investment, and to look at how you can bring in even more technical infrastructure to help you to do data collection better, and also to promote standardization in terms of your processes, and how you can use technology to work with your internal stakeholders to make things better. Okay, and then lastly, must remember to ask for help to understand more about unexplained HRMS features, because I believe there's really a great underutilization of your HRMS if you do not know exactly what kind of functions are available to you. So do reach out to your HRMS providers to ask them more questions. Okay, so with that, I'm concluding my webinar, and so these are the statements which I would like to make. Okay, so payroll is a function that demands high accuracy, and there are very stringent deadlines to meet. So what you can do with the payroll challenges, your payroll monsters, is prioritize what you can do to tackle the challenges in the short term and in the long term, and be proactive, ask more questions, and to make full use of your HRMS to help you to automate and make your life easier. So thank you very much, everyone, for your time.
Thank you, Joyce. Thanks for the really very insightful and very practical tips that you have shared. I believe it would definitely help a lot of our HR professionals here today, especially those that are really handling this function itself, payroll. I really like how practical Joyce is, how she shared her own case, what kind of issues she had. I really love that you use the term monster to describe the payroll issues. I think, in all honesty, I believe how bad the situation can get if really if someone were to be placed in what you had gone through, Joyce, and which is why I think you have termed it as a monster. I can imagine the amount of double work you have to do on a monthly basis in that sense. And I do agree that I think for a lot of payroll HR that HR are handling, do really keep a lookout to ensure that you know very well the functions of your HRMS that you are using, whether you can tap on more of the functions that will actually help improve your efficiency in that sense. And in fact, I believe that these days a lot of HRMS system is supposed to help you do that, and to prevent you from having to do double work. Yeah. So thank you again, Joyce. We'll bring Joyce back for the Q&A segment later on. Okay. So now I would actually like to hand over to our second speaker of the day, Mr. Rajat. So Rajat is the head of sales and client engagement APAC at Rewardz. So Rajat is responsible for business growth in Southeast Asia and works closely with the regional HR community on ways to continuously improve employee experiences. Therefore, I think Raja would definitely be a great speaker to share with us on how we can actually build flexibility, recognition, and fun in our compensation framework. Raja, please.
Sure, thank you for that, Leonard. Let me just share my screen. Okay, hi, good afternoon. Hope you're all doing well. My name is Rajat, and I'm the head of client engagement and sales here at Rewardz. I've been in the HR space for more than 12 years in Singapore, Malaysia, and Japan. And I'm very passionate about employee experience and working with the HR community across the region. So today I'll be speaking to you about building flexibility, recognition, and fun in your compensation framework. Let me provide a quick introduction to my company, Rewardz. So starting in 2012 here in Singapore, we've expanded the business to 19 countries over the last 8 years through local offices and partnerships. Today, we work with over 150 corporate clients and with over 1,000 merchant partners, supporting over 250,000 users across the region. So today, I'll be covering with you 3 main topics in my talk. First, challenges with traditional compensation programs, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. Second, building flexible compensation for a diverse workforce. And third, incorporating recognition and digital rewards in your flexible benefit strategy. So let's get started. So I'm sure many of you would be familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of human needs. Starting at the bottom with physiological needs, such as food and sleep, stepping up to things like love and belonging, and at the right, at the top end there, going all the way to self-actualization. When we apply this to the modern workplace, we can see a clear connection. Starting with basics like salary and benefits, stepping up to culture and recognition, and going all the way to leadership and growth. It turns out that a majority of your best employees also deeply care about the benefits as well as culture and recognition provided by the organization. In fact, your compensation strategy can actually motivate people and drive them to give their best and be rockstar employees. So the combination of the right benefits, culture, and recognition is really important in an organization. In fact, what we see is the millennial and Gen Z generations care even more about the culture and recognition in choosing their place of work. So how can you create an organization of rockstar employees? So let's take a step back and consider the challenges with traditional compensation programs. So traditional compensation programs are typically composed of three main components. The first is the fixed interval payment, which is the salary. Secondly is the performance-based variable bonuses. And third is some form of fixed health benefits, which we are all familiar with. But today, organizations everywhere are realizing that this compensation structure is just not enough, doesn't go very far. And the main reason behind this is what we call the multi-generational workforce. Employers of today need to balance employees from various generations, life stages, and interests. It is a challenge for comp and ben leaders to fulfill the requirements of your workforce while keeping costs in check. To give a very simple example, people with families and kids would like to have things like childcare allowance and similar benefits, whereas someone younger coming from a Gen Z might like electronics or entertainment vouchers. So how do you balance that? And given that in the next 5 years, by 2025, majority of the workforce will be millennials and Gen Z, we need even more flexibility in our compensation programs. And this has all been further aggravated by the recent pandemic. Employees are demanding more flexibility in their benefits and perks. Health and safety benefits have become of even greater importance, and employees are demanding that their company provide insurance options to complement their personal insurance plans. And more flexibility is needed in working locations and working hours. In fact, according to a recent HR Pulse survey, personal health, remote work, and mental health were some of the top concerns on the employees' minds, right behind job security. This was also further corroborated in a recent survey we ran among our clients and HR leaders, where they cited employee engagement and morale as the top concern in the post-COVID workplace. So at the same time, with all this, HR's ability to respond is affected by fixed budgets and limited resources, which you all face. So looking at these challenges, how do we build flexible compensation programs for today's diverse workforce? And that's where the concept of flexi benefits or flex comes in. The concept of flexi benefits is driven out of the need to satisfy the requirements of a multi-generational workforce. First originating in the US and Europe and gaining popularity in Asia over the last few years as a way for an organization to fulfill employee needs while providing a lot of flexibility for the employees. So flexi benefits provides a way for employees to buy or select their benefits from a suite of options like core benefits and complementary benefits, starting with that initial allocation of flex dollars or credit at the start of the financial year. So let me show you a quick video of an example of how flex benefit selections might work using a platform. This will help you to visualize the selections. So the system gets started with a basic show of the employee designation and date of joining. Going to the dashboard, you can see the previous year's selection, including initial credit and credit used. And when the employee goes to make a selection, they're shown a suite of options like my protection benefits, which includes your insurance options. Moving on to my medical benefits. So things like medical inpatient, medical outpatient, that the employee can actually select depending on their preferences. And then moving on to complementary benefits, which could include things like dental, health screening, and even leaves, which people can buy and sell depending on their preferences. At the end, the employee can actually see their full view of their overall benefits selections. And some of the remaining dollars can also be given to the employee to claim or to carry on over the next year. So something like this is a very simple selection process to provide to the employee, which provides much more options and flexibility to the employee. So Flex, in summary, has several advantages for the workforce as well as the employer. For the HR teams, Flex improves the employer brand and allows for better flexibility in the benefits for the workforce. Employers can also plan the overall benefits and the budgets, irrespective of the choices made by the employees, while caring about their increasingly diverse workforce. The system is actually shown to be highly valued by employees and has an impact on engagement and morale. So this brings me to my third section, is how you can actually tie flexi benefits as well as recognition and digital rewards and make it part of your flexible benefit strategy. So I'm sure many of you would have actually explored flex benefit solution already for your organization. But a lesser known fact is actually that even though flex is great, there's certain limitations and drawbacks. To start, each employee only receives a fixed allocation of flexi dollars at the start of every year, and that's based on their job grade. By design, flex is only used a few times a year, once at selections at the start of the year, and then to submit the claims. In fact, market research has shown that employees prefer to submit their flexi claims only a few times a year. And then there are delays in reimbursements after claim submissions, leading to frustration and low engagement with your workforce. All this, in the end, can sometimes result in Flex being an expensive but a passive platform. So what if I told you that actually you can overcome the limitations of Flex by marrying your flexi benefit strategy with your employee engagement and recognition strategy, and resulting in what we call a super flex. So imagine you can start the year with flex dollars, but also you can earn points throughout the year based on your performance. Let me give you more details here. So additional points by the employee can be earned throughout the year based on performance, milestones, and positive behaviors, and peer recognition and nominations. A lot of the initiatives that the HR teams are already very familiar with. In this way, not only can you reward traditional milestones, things like birthdays, work anniversaries, and service awards, but also incentivize meeting KPIs and attending trainings and exhibiting corporate values, all within the same platform. These points can then actually be used to claim your benefits or even be redeemed for cash vouchers at your favorite merchants instantly. Merchants like Grab, Lazada, Zalora, Cold Storage. So no waiting for cumbersome claims and reimbursements coming through a few weeks later. This way you can actually empower each individual to select their own rewards, leading to far greater engagement. So in summary, a super flex program provides many advantages, like firstly, a truly flexible program where employees can earn points throughout the year and choose their own rewards. There's automation where points allocation can be automated with existing frameworks and systems. It can be aligned with business goals where milestones and positive behaviors are actually rewarded throughout the year. And actually can differentiate you as an employer of choice by having an engaged and motivated workforce and have a hiring advantage against your competitors. So let me close with a few successful case studies of companies who are using a similar framework to incentivize their employees. One is an online property portal company is using our platform to build a culture of appreciation and manage their corporate HR programs throughout Southeast Asia. They allocate points for internal incentive schemes like long service award, events, and corporate awards, all through an online app and system. And we have seen consistent usage throughout this pandemic, driving home the relevance of establishing a great corporate culture using a mobile platform. One of our largest clients is driving well-being and engagement through the provision of wellness products and services, all with Flexi Dollars. Employees are given Flex Dollars to redeem and enjoy digital vouchers and discounted wellness products, driving higher engagement and employee satisfaction. And lastly, one of our manufacturing clients here in the region have launched a fully digital and mobile Flexi benefit solution, incorporating benefit selections, marketplace, and claim submissions, all in one platform, along with recognition and incentive features as well. So this program is seeing high levels of engagement with the company, and they're looking to roll out the program to more of its subsidiaries next year in 2021. So that pretty much brings me to the end of my talk. Thank you so much. Hope you found it interesting and happy to answer any questions. Back to you, Lennon.
Rajat. Hi. Thank you, Rajat. Thanks so much. I'm really very intrigued by both Joyce and Rajat sharing today. So many practical tips. I mean, so much of the practical tips, and really something that I myself would like to take it on, honestly. So let's bring Joyce back so we can move on to some Q&A from the participants. So Rajat, before we kick off the Q&A from the participants' angle, I just have one question for you in terms of the Flexi reward system. I really like how you had did your sharing across about the multi-generation that's actually in the current workforce. And in fact, this topic itself has been brought up by many people that I've spoken to in terms of HR. And the issues that you've pointed out clearly in your deck, that the traditional compensation benefit is not enough, definitely, especially if you're talking about the millennials, the Gen Z or the Gen Y, you would say, even the early 20s that are coming into the working space especially, right? I mean, they are completely different. I would say that I'm considered a millennial, but I would like to claim that, okay?
Same here.
But my point across is, you know, these are really great. I mean, what you have shared across the Flexi benefit is excellent. And but how can an organization like an SME, an organization that has a small group of staff only, say maybe between 10 to 20, in fact, even consider looking into this kind of Flexi benefit for their organization? Because to me, I think that even if you're small, having this kind of benefit actually would in fact be even better for your organization in that sense, because given that you're small, you want to make sure that your staff are closely knitted, they stay on with your organization, right, for a long period of time in that sense. So how do you go about doing it? How do you suggest that an SME can push this to the management and implement it?
That's a very good question, Lennon, and that's actually something we face, on a daily basis. We talk with SMEs here in Singapore on almost a daily basis. And what you mentioned at the end there, that for SMEs or startups who are in that growth journey, actually keeping your employees together and keeping them motivated and sometimes working really hard is actually really, really important for the success of the business. So even though it can be a little bit of challenging when you compare to a large company with a lot more resources at your fingertips, we still advise small companies, less than 50 or less than 25 employees, to have something very basic. It can even be built into your, even an HRMS system, or it could be a standalone platform for Flexi benefits. And you don't need to give a lot of options for an SME. You can only give maybe 2 or 3 options in each segment, like medical benefits or core benefits or life insurance. And you can even give the employee, what they like to do is give them the option of not selecting something, right? If they already have a great personal insurance plan, for example, maybe they don't need that company insurance plan, or they need something different. So having that flexibility without going into very large numbers of options can be the way forward for SMEs to try and get that approval from the senior management.
Thanks so much for sharing. I completely agree with you. I think sometimes it's about giving employees the options, right? Rather than saying no to everything or giving them a fixed set of compensation benefits, which you think will be useful for them, but they may already have their own. And because being millennials these days, I think a lot of them like to have their own choices, right? But something I want to add on the ground is I think that having this kind of honestly flexi benefit system, be it as a standalone app like you shared or built in into a HRMS system, is going to improve efficiency of an organization, in fact, because from what I understand traditionally, if an organization do not have this kind of application or function built in into a HRMS, how a staff goes about claiming for even your simple medical or dental benefits, you have to go through your HR, your line manager, your HR, and then to your finance, right? So there are so many people involved in the work. But if you have this built in your own software or an app, the stuff just goes in and apply, and then you get your claim straight away, and the organization doesn't have to worry about the workflow. It does take away quite a lot of time from a HR professional and from a finance standpoint, right? So I think it is something that honestly most organizations should consider, in fact. So maybe let's take a look at the spontaneous questions that we have today from the participants, okay? So there's a question for Joyce, okay? So what are the challenges to manage payroll as a shared service for multiple organizations of various industries? So any tips for the managers who's managing the payroll team? Trying to pick your brain, Joyce.
Well, sure. I'll be very happy to share my experience. Okay, so I think for managing like subsidiaries and also like related companies within a huge organization, and if they come from different industry, so I think first of all we need to understand how the different subsidiaries, how their business actually work, to understand their their psychic in terms of their com and ben, what are the things that really is important to them. Like, is there like an overtime culture in that particular kind of industry, or is there some complex com and ben issues that they face? Like we have like trading companies, and we also have like some white collar related industries and so on, and then we have a lot of like exceptional cases in the compensation. So we need to be prepared how to react to these kind of exceptions and make them become the norm instead of always exceptions. Okay, and also I think in terms of managing the payroll team, there's really like many ways of doing it, but I would say first and foremost, if you are the manager of the payroll team, you have to be very firm and professional, and also to really set some guidelines and rules for your team to follow, and so that you can also communicate the same rules and guidelines to the internal stakeholders to follow. So there's really like there's definitely going to be a lot of gray areas, and people will try to push you very hard to please, can you push in one more transaction and so on. So first of all, you be the black and white, and then therefore how much gray area you can leverage, you can actually leverage on. Yeah, so we do know, we have to give a buffer, but we don't tell people what's the buffer. that's my standpoint. That's the way to manage it, because we know definitely people will try to push you for some help last minute. It happens. Okay, and so you will also want to be like the go-to person in terms of taking care of statutory related question. You want to give your team and also to the stakeholders the assurance that yes, you know what you're doing, you know exactly these are the rules that you need to comply with, and these are the limitations. You will be able to be the final voice in telling people this is the way to do it. Yeah, and no exceptions. All right, you have to be very firm about that. Okay, and also I think in terms of the technical sense, the manager of the payroll team will want to have an overarching understanding of the HRMS in order to understand the limitations faced by your team, and also what kind of potential automation and improvement in the processes that you can recommend and to drive in terms of the technical improvements. Yeah.
Agree. Thanks so much, Joyce. I think I really like your suggestion that the HR payroll manager itself definitely have to be firm and really understand the limitations yourself, so that you know that you can't be pushed over to a certain extent. And like you shared, I think being a shared service across different entities, right, multi
Leonard, I think we lost you there.
I just want to bring back, I hope this had really helped the participant answer the question. So I just, no sound. Can all of you hear us? Because I think one of the participants is saying that no sound. So
yeah,
okay, great.
It's okay now, Leonard. Yeah, I think we lost you there for a second. But
Oh, so sorry.
I think you're
Yeah.
okay now.
Yeah. So I just want to bring it back to the question that, oh, so sorry. Can you hear me now? I'm sorry about the 10 seconds lag.
You're fine. You're fine.
So I just want to bring back the last part about what I was saying, that the payroll manager, I think you should try to really look at making it an exception, a norm, so that it doesn't become an exception on a monthly basis. Otherwise, it'll be very difficult for you to handle, especially across multi-organizations. And I would like to bring back the early question that I pointed out to Rajat, to bring along to Joyce. Because Rajat mentioned about considering bringing flexi benefits into the existing HRMS system, and being a consultant in a HRMS organization, how do you see that, Joyce? I mean, how do you see that being able to leverage? I mean, how a HR can leverage that in order to bring a flexi benefit system, and whether it can actually save a lot of time for the HR person, like how I think it would. Do you get my question, or you don't quite understand?
Don't quite understand.
Okay, maybe
like
I put it across again. What I was trying to ask was, because Rajat mentioned about having a flexi benefit system, right? Which can be actually integrated in an existing HRMS, such as maybe Unit4's ProSoft system. So in terms of your experience, do you think that this kind of integration will actually in fact aid the HR to save some time and be more efficient?
Well, definitely you can do that. In terms of like integrating the two systems, so you can have like a platform which is more the employees can use and find it engaging, and then the data, right, is flowed to the HRMS, and the HRMS can do the validation if need to, and at least you can ensure that there is really like no manual intervention in between, and therefore the job time, the time and effort for checking is reduced. So I think that can be done.
Great. Thank you. So a question for flex program. So for the flex program, is there a clawback clause? Meaning if you resign before end of a calendar year, you will need to pay back to the employer. How do you deal with that, Raja, in terms of the system-wise then?
That's a good question. It depends on company to company. I think it depends on your SOPs and your sort of frameworks for the company. So some companies do like to have that clawback clause, especially there could be like a 6-month window where if the employee is leaving before 6 months within a financial year versus leaving towards the end of the financial year, this could be different kind of policies applied to benefits, just like your other compensation or your bonuses or something like that can also be tied. Similarly, can be prorated as well. Right. So it depends on the company's policies, I would say. But in terms of the overall benefits, because like, again, a lot of the insurance benefits or medical benefits are not being claimed by the employee once they leave the organization as well. Right. So, most companies will be quite generous with not being very strict with employees if they're leaving in terms of trying to get back too much of the benefits. Otherwise can lead to some complaints or kind of a bad taste in the mouth as well.
Thanks, Raja. I agree. I think employer branding these days is very important, right? Yeah, which is why a lot of, I think employers are beginning to understand why they should move into this sort of flexi compensation benefit. And I completely agree with you. So I hope we help to answer this attendee's question. You really got to consider internally in terms of the HR policy. What is the typical HR policy that your organization have? And work with the vendor. If, I mean, for example, like Rewardz, I'm very sure they work very closely with their clients and built in and customize this HR policies within this compensation program that they are rolling out. These are definitely all customizable in that sense. So speak to either Rewardz or the company that you are working with. They should be able to help you. Okay.
Right, and just to add to that, Leonard, just to complete my thought there, I would say, of course, when the unclaimed dollars in the employees' accounts, which have not been claimed for via submission of a claim or in the marketplace, I showed you like some of the vouchers and stuff that we provide as well. As long as they're unclaimed, they still go back to the company's wallet. So it's not a loss for the companies and not a loss for the employer as long as they're unclaimed. Yeah.
Yeah. So I in all honesty, I'm really so excited about the program. I think for millennials and the younger generation, it's going to be so interesting for them, and I think they'll really enjoy this benefit lah. So okay, coming back to another question for Joyce. So does a typical HRMS is a typical HRMS capable of handling and tracking employees' entitlement and claims under the government paid leave scheme? I believe this would be the standard statutory requirements that you were talking about, right, Joyce? Could you help this attendee?
Well, definitely you can configure the system to follow exactly what the government requirements are. You can do it like even all the way Employment Act, what it has, and you can really just go, if your company's policy is really like minimum 7 days, do it, no problem. Yep, you can do that. And also childcare leave, maternity leave, that kind of thing, all can follow the government related requirements. Not an issue at all.
Okay, I hope that had helped the attendee. Okay, let's see. So one more question for Joyce. What are the considerations for outsourcing payroll versus performing the function in-house? I think you would have both experiences, so best for you to advise, Joyce.
Well, okay, first of all, right, whether you outsource the payroll or you do it in-house is really, ultimately you are responsible for checking, all right? So this is definitely the first thing. However, the considerations that you have is really to compare the costs, okay, and also the time. So the cost and the time is really like the cost of outsourcing versus the cost of doing it in-house. And also the time, do you want to spend the time to do the payroll yourself, or do you prefer to do something else? So you need to evaluate exactly what is the HR's organization structure in your organization. What do you want your HR team members to do? Yeah, do you want them to focus on other areas of HR other than just payroll? And so therefore you prefer to outsource? Because for some companies, right, they are very fast moving, and then they also have like a lot of different professionals and so on, and they need the HR to be more engaging and instead of purely being operational. So they may want their HR team to be functioning more a bit like the partner style, and to be able to engage the line managers, all your employees in a very effective manner. So probably you may want to consider taking payroll out of your in-house function and to outsource that in that sense. Yeah.
Thanks, Joyce. I agree. I think it largely depends on the organizational structure. That's one, right? And then you have to look at the practicalism of it, right, in terms of costing and time efficiency, I think, ultimately. So I hope this helped Mint to consider, within your organization. So a question for Rajat. So what type of flexi benefits would you suggest for a company with migrant workers? Yeah, this is interesting. I'm sure you have worked with organizations that have plenty of it, right? So share a little bit, Rajat.
Right. So we definitely work with companies in the manufacturing space where you have more migrant workers as well, coming from even places like Malaysia or India or across the region. And again, going back to the basics there, what you want to be providing is basics in terms of your medical benefits, your insurance, and then some complementary benefits as well. So things like it could be a health screening, which a lot of employees want to have, but what also recently I heard from one of the HR directors is that the usage of something like a health screening can be very, very low as well. So providing that as an option in a flexi benefits system where employees who really like to have that health screening option, they can still make use of it. But employees who say, I'm going to skip the health screening this year or next year, they can actually skip that and they can get something else, which could be like a dental benefits or eye care benefits or something like that, right? So that is about, I think, just providing enough options within your benefits budget it applies to almost any kind of worker for these kind of organizations. Plus having some complementary benefits, like I mentioned, that really goes, I think, beyond to making the employees feel engaged and feeling like company is actually doing something for me. And complementary benefits could be things like, childcare leave. It could be, I've seen some companies even having pet care allowance or childcare allowance. And I've seen companies having electronics allowances or transport allowances. So within the same budget of, let's say, $200 to $500, but you can actually provide different options to different people, that can actually go a long way into making people feel satisfied. And you can then augment with things like giving a bit of dollars or giving a bit of points for, it could be like at the end of the year, like a new year, or it could be something like your birthday or work anniversary. So you can augment that slightly more, again, depending on your framework or on your budget.
Thanks, Rajat. I agree. I think to further answer to this attendee, I guess you got to look at internally in terms of your employees' requirements in that sense, right? Be it migrant or local, I'm sure they would all have certain things that they are looking at, what kind of benefits that they prefer to have. So consider maybe perhaps doing an internal survey just to find out the likes and needs of your organization itself, your employees. And then that would help the organization work with the flexi benefits provider to implement what sort of benefits you want to have there for your workers. Yeah. So one more question. So how, for Flex program itself, Rajat, how can company manage cost if they would like to integrate other benefits such as service award into a Flex program?
Right, so I think Flex actually ends up saving costs for a lot of organizations, because what you're doing is actually you're providing more options and more benefits, but still within a fixed cost of what you are, what you want to have as a budget for your per employee basis, right? So the idea that we are, our idea is really to provide that Flex benefits in terms of, your core, complementary, and medical and non-medical benefits basically, and then augment that with, service awards. A lot of companies are already doing that, right? A lot of companies already providing things like long service awards, or they might have some allowance or bonus at the end of the year. What you can do is you can have those awards rather than giving a cash award, or some of the companies also have more old style things like giving out watches or giving out like gold coins. We've seen all of these in our experiences, right? Which maybe made sense 20 years ago or 10 years ago. But again, going back to the millennials and Gen Z, maybe they don't want that, right? They want something different. They want something more quick and instant as well. So you can, rather than having that big allowance at the end of your 10-year period, or where you give out a gold coin to somebody for staying in the company for 10 years, you can actually break it down and give something to people for staying in the company every year as a, on an ongoing basis, or every second year, you get certain number of points or flexi dollars that you can then go and purchase something on Lazada, for example, right? That will go a much longer way in having that engagement and having people feel motivated by that, rather than having something at 10 years time or 15 years time. There are a lot of companies, let's face it, most employees don't stay that long with one company, right? You have much more of a churn. So you can have the same budget or cost, but you break it down into smaller chunks is what we normally advise to our clients.
Thanks, Rajat. I really like the idea. I think especially these days, long service awards to me are a little bit outdated already, right? So considering breaking them into smaller chunks actually does make a lot of sense. And in fact, like you shared, I think it does really help the organizations become more cost effective, in fact, in terms of offering flex programs. Yeah. So, okay, another question for Joyce. So on regional payroll, so if the participant is asking if my company has employees located in countries outside of Singapore, can the HRMS handle such a setup? I believe it's because if they are out of Singapore, there are different requirements in terms of taxation and other employee, act, right, across different countries. So how can you advise that, Joyce?
Okay, so first of all, right, you have to see whether this is a case of a secondment, and then of course whether the employee's salary is still paid by Singapore or is going to be paid outside of Singapore. And then if the payroll of the employee in another country but still managed within Singapore, then of course you will have to check your payroll, your HRMS settings to see whether you can comply with both Singapore and non-Singapore payroll. So just an example, for Unit 4, we are compliant with 10 different countries. And so there would be like 9 different regions outside of Singapore, basically. So you have to check if your employee is in those other countries, right? What are the requirements that you need? And then therefore the different kinds of reports you can generate from the payroll system, they should be able to help you to do the necessary tax filing and reporting to the government authorities. Yep.
Thanks, Joyce. I think that's a very practical tip. So for this attendee, I think like Joyce shared, you got to look at the HRMS system that you have, whether they are compliant with the countries that your organization have offices in. If not, if you do not have a HRMS system at this point in time and you're sourcing, do keep a lookout for this as one of the additional point that you want to look into having a HRMS, right? Okay, so I'm going to take in one last question, and I think this question is actually suited for both our speakers today, and I think it gives a very good summary of our entire session. So while the attendees say the question is for Joyce, but I really think that it's suited for both of you. So with a lot of jobs going online and the need for companies to differentiate themselves as employers of choice, how are compensation programs, policies changing, and how can available tools help in keeping up with these changes? So maybe Rajat would like to go first.
Sure. I think this is very relevant to what I shared a lot in my presentation as well. There are a lot of companies these days, they're looking for that. They want to be the employer of choice, and that top talent is still very hard to there's a war for talent, and companies want to attract the best talent. Especially when everybody's working remotely, it becomes even easier to sort of switch between companies, right? So I think that definitely you need to look at, again, going back to the traditional compensation programs, that you have to evolve from there and going beyond into looking at, okay, what are the wellness initiatives you are offering? What are the engagement recognition initiatives you are offering? What are things like appreciations that we are offering? All these, and inclusive of recently we've seen, talking to a lot of HR leaders, they're looking into wellness as a big part of it as well. And you can take wellness as quite a big picture of not just something like a STEPS challenge, which has been very popular in Singapore over many years, but doing things like online workshops for physical wellness as well as mental wellness is a big trend at the moment, right? So looking at the wellness aspect, both on physical wellness and mental wellness, and then providing collaboration tools between employees so that they still feel they're part of the team, where, together with their team, with their managers, with their subordinates, as well as a wider company, tools like what we're using today, as well as having some set frameworks of, having, let's say, managers, doing meetings or having some incentives for keeping their teams and their employees engaged and motivated. HR teams really, I think we definitely have our work cut out in terms of being at the forefront of that strategy shift. And I think COVID has only, made that much faster and kind of aggravated that for all the HR teams to be really at the forefront of that strategic shift.
Yeah, I agree with you, Rajat. Thanks so much. Maybe Joyce would like to give your thought about this. What do you think, Joyce?
Sure. Okay, so I look at it as in different areas. So first of all is that compensation programs and policies changing for the current market right now, as in, you know, when there are more people working at home, jobs going online and so on. So we must look at our pay strategy, of course, to make sure that your pay strategy for the entire organization is sustainable. So we also want to look at some of the traditional pay elements that we have, like for example, the the local transport allowance, that kind of thing, right? So instead of giving employees transport allowance as a fixed, like a monthly recurring kind of pay as part of the pay package, right? You may want to think of how to redirect this amount into different ways of benefiting your employees instead. And also, you know, when we look at also the employee engagement side of things, is that um, our performance management and also employee engagement strategy will have to change as well. And how we measure performance is also going to be quite different. So can we still look at things like no attendance, punctuality, that kind of thing? I don't think so. So there are different ways you need to measure a performance basically, and how do you reward the employees, and how do you also measure like employee engagement? And then of course, back to my techie self. Okay, so when we when we talk about employee engagement, of course we also look at, you know, the employees, you know, from end to end, how do they feel about the HR tools that they are going to use when they are working at home? So you want all your HR resources to be for the employee self-service and so on, right, to be highly user-friendly, so it leaves a very good impression on the employees all the way. And so they don't feel like, okay, I need help and I'm working at home, I can't go to office and look for help. So I can still do it at home in my own laptop and platform, and I'm still very comfortable with it. And I know I'm still engaged. Yeah, this is how I feel.
Thanks, Joyce and Rajat, for giving such a good roundup and summary. So I would like to just round up quickly of what both our speakers have shared with us today, because I personally really do think that they are really one of the best practical tips we have had in many of our webinars. So I sincerely thank both of you for your sharing today. So I think for HR professionals, looking at this new normal of work moving forward, right, with a lot of stuff going forward to be working from home itself, you really got to look at your HRMN system and even your compensation system internally to ensure that it is really what moving forward, what your organization and what your staff needs. Across board, you likely won't be able to have one HRMS system or one perfect compensation system that will fit every one of you here today. You really got to look at your own organization internally, understand your organization's business needs and your staff, or your employees' needs, in order to sort of engage in a very useful HRMS system, which will be able to help you with your accuracy, flexibility, and usability, like Joyce had shared. And for your staff to, you know, like what Rajat has shared, to have a rock star employee culture in that sense, you really got to look at it really internally in order to have that recognition, to let your employees feel the recognition and enjoy the culture within working within your organization. And lastly, I would just like to stress that we are really working in a state of multi-generational workforce. So there's a lot of aspect for HR to look at and for HR to step up today. So with that, I really would like to conclude our webinar today and thank both our speakers for your insightful sharing again. Thank you both, Rajat and Joyce. Okay, so now we're just gonna... Thanks, Rajat.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Joyce. So thank you again, and I will see you very soon. Bye-bye.